Electric vehicles are fueling the European Union's trade tensions with Beijing. Beginning today, the European Union imposes tariffs of up to 37.6% on imports of electric vehicles made in China. There is a 4-month window during which the tariffs are only provisional, and intensive talks are expected to continue between the two sides. The European Commission's provisional duties are designed to prevent a threatened flood of cheap EVs built with state subsidies. The EU anti-subsidy investigation has nearly 4 more months to run. Once it is done, the Commission could propose definite duties, typically applying for 5 years, on which EU members would vote.
What the EU wishes for is a solution. It is not the introduction of tariffs. The introduction of tariffs is not an objective per se. It is a means to correct an imbalance, an unfair competitive situation to the detriment of producers of electric vehicles in the EU compared to those who are producing vehicles in China. And that is precisely why we have been so vocal on the fact that we want this dialogue with our Chinese counterparts, and this dialogue is taking place.
Tariffs will be different for different EV makers. While China's largest EV maker BYD will face duties of 17%, Geely will be taxed close to 20%. Chinese state-owned firm SAIC will be taxed at the highest rate. And these are the top of EU standard 10% duties on car imports. Western car makers exporting from China, who the EU says have cooperated with the anti-subsidy probe, will face the heat as well. Tesla and BMW will be subject to 20.8% tariffs. The European Commission says the share of Chinese EVs in Europe could touch 15% next year. And compared to EU models, the Chinese ones are about 20% cheaper. The EU launched its anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese EVs last October.
The main message is they want them to build those cars in Europe, not in China. I think tariffs in general are designed to do two things. It's to slow down the rate at which companies that are exporting would be exporting. It would be redirecting the focus to localization.
Analysts say that the EU tariffs will force companies using made-in-China exports as their business model to reconsider that strategy and look for other greener markets. And the tariffs won't help European car makers either.
China will redirect its going global efforts to Southeast Asia, to Latin America, to Middle East, to Africa, to places in the world that will welcome the Chinese brands because they're affordable. Basically, you're giving China the open invitation to go everywhere else and avoid the markets where the protections exist. That doesn't make the companies inside that tariff wall more competitive. It makes them weaker in competition with the Chinese.
On the day the EU announced high tariffs, BYD opened an EV plant in Thailand, the automaker's first factory in Southeast Asia.
我们期待为泰国带来先进的新能源汽车技术，推动泰国汽车产业链的转型升级，助力泰国制造风靡东南亚，走向全世界。
Thailand is the largest overseas market for BYD. The Thai government wants EVs to make up a third of cars produced there by 2030. BYD says its Thailand factory can make 150,000 EVs per year. It will also act as a hub for exports to ASEAN countries and beyond.
There's really no winners in this clash, right? But if we talk about who loses more, I'd say it's actually these European automakers, specifically the Germans and the premium ones, because they are producing in China and exporting some of those models, as you mentioned, back to Europe, while at the same time they're facing a downturn in market share in China. So it's almost like a double-edged sword or a double whammy.
On a day the EU tariffs came into force, China announced that it will hold an anti-dumping hearing on brandy imported from the EU on the 18th of July. The trade war is revving up, for sure.